Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Johnny.
Today, we're going to talk about movies.
Horror movies, to be exact.
Because this is Gutted, and that's what we do.
Yes, and one thing we want to mention, too, is that this episode and past episodes are available on Anchor, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also watch this episode on YouTube. And what's cool about that is YouTube has previous episodes on there as well that are in a different format. It was stuff we were doing way before we decided to do this layout and provide a podcast version of each episode. So be sure to check that out and subscribe.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about The Void.
The Void.
Yes.
And 2016, right?
2016.
is what the official year on it. As we were looking around, there was some different, 2017 was also posted, but might have been when it was widely released. But
it was actually a suggestion.
Yes.
From a YouTube subscriber who mentioned it to us on one of our videos.
Yes.
Countermeasures.
Countermeasures. Yes, thank you. That was awesome. We ask our audience to please send us suggestions, and I'm glad Countermeasures came through. Because,
yeah, 6 months ago.
6 months ago. Yes.
But we got there.
Exactly. And on
That's
that
what matters.
On that note too, we are planning to really make this up our frequency for content. We had another commenter asking about that, when our new episodes. So we're happy to be back here, and we're hoping to make this more often now that we're getting more feedback and a little bit more time here and there.
Yeah, so we don't really have a schedule of when each episode comes out. We sort of just roll with the idea of if we can get one out every month, then that's great. But sometimes that's not the case because we work full-time jobs and we do the best we can with what we've got. And sometimes we're lucky and we can get 2 episodes out in a month, every month. And then as you have seen, maybe a few months go by and we didn't have time to put out an episode.
Exactly.
But hopefully that won't happen again.
No, exactly.
So, The Void.
The Void, yes. What a very interesting movie. And when, I don't know about you, but when there's things going on in the world, I tend to bog down a little bit and start kicking up my viewing of movies and different things. And the time that we're recording this now, there's a big thing going on in the world right now, the coronavirus or COVID-19, and people are pretty much on a heightened alert right now. It's considered a pandemic. So it's really interesting on that note too. We've seen, at least I've seen some data online, people are watching movies and content that's related to things like this. And that's evident in the movie Contagion, which came out like 2005, 6 maybe. I could get those. Probably have those years wrong, but it's interesting to see that people amp up their viewership of things relating to the world around them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting choice. Personally, something like that feels like it just hits a little too close to home. Like, why would I want to go into fantasy world to freak out about what's happening in the real world?
Yeah.
I don't know. The Void for me, though, was kind of that, hey, it could always be worse.
It can definitely,
it's just a reminder.
Yes.
Shit could always be worse, man.
Totally. We find, you and I, we've talked about this, but we find apocalyptic, type of settings and stories and plots very fascinating. The idea of how people respond to craziness around them, the world falling apart, essentially. In a way, I feel like that's kind of happening in real life. But as you say, too, why do people try to amp that up by getting more scared by watching things like that? But hey, I kind of do that too, so I'm sort of guilty. And with The Void, too, it does have that vibe to it. Like, oh my gosh, the world's falling apart. What is happening? You're seeing things unfold. So this movie is really interesting because the people that are in it aren't really household names. The talent.
No.
Names I didn't recognize initially. I was like, who are these people? Who are these people that directed? Which was like 2 directors in this movie, which is also very interesting. You don't see. I feel like that's very uncommon in general, but especially in the horror world with movies. You don't see dual directors credited as 2 people.
No, I haven't really seen that, and I wouldn't have known that had you not told me.
Both of them being Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski. Steven Kostanski is credited with doing a lot more with things in the visual arts department, the makeup departments. And you can definitely see how that came into play in The Void too, because there's minimal, I think there's 0 CGI if I'm not mistaken in this movie.
No, I don't think I saw anything like that. I think everything was practical, which is beautiful.
Yes.
You never see that anymore.
No, you don't.
And I was really pleasantly surprised. Now, first impressions, though, going into the film was a whole lot of, what the fuck?
Yes.
What am I looking at right now? But staring at it from like a horror fan perspective, it is one of those moments where you're looking at another fan.
Oh, yeah.
In the making of this movie,
Totally.
that's exactly the impression that I got,
Mm-hmm.
was some huge horror fanatic has made this film, and they just threw everything that they had at that project. I mean, the love for the design of the monsters,
Yes.
the creatures, the storytelling, the visuals, and sort of this interwoven concept of alternate realities. I don't even know if it's alternate realities. It's just like other dimensions,
Right.
or something. It was very confusing,
It was, and
but in a good way.
yeah,
Not
it
in
was,
a bad way.
No, exactly. It had all the elements of movies that I've seen in the past, in terms of especially 80s era horror films. You know, I immediately think
golden era.
right, The Thing. I think
Yes.
about, especially with the practical effects and the creatures and just the imagination you must have to create these things. I mean, that's a talent on its own, in my opinion. How do you come up with this monstrosity of a human transforming into a creature? I mean, this movie has all of that, and then some too.
I love when horror movies can make me come outside of my body a little bit, when I like feeling the adrenaline, like I'm part of that roller coaster of a horror movie, and at the same time I'm laughing out loud because I'm just so swept up in what I'm looking at that I can't contain it inside of my body. I just start laughing. It's just a weird reaction I have because I'm so excited about what I'm looking at. The image I can't get out of my head. So they're in the basement of the hospital.
Yes.
And they stumble across the creatures that want to die, but the doctor won't let them. And it's the one that is slamming its head.
I knew you would like that part when I saw it.
Repeatedly. There's a perfect hole through their head that the camera actually looks through. Mm-hmm. And it's just repeatedly slamming its head into a pole, trying to kill itself, I assume.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
That was very shocking imagery to see. Just a person or something that once was a person, like piercing its head on an open hole and just slamming it against the wall constantly.
Like hoping a different reaction will come from this thing it's been doing over and over and over.
Right. And the specific makeup department and costuming for that scene was really well done, because it looks like it's literally someone slamming their head and doing that. Obviously, they had to make a hole, so it's not really someone's head, but with the neck movement and how it was happening, it was like
CGI. Like, how did they make that happen?
Exactly. And maybe someone was underneath and they had like a head
an extension,
above them,
but even still, like the weight and the movement, the proportions.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanics just
because it had only a neck,
very real.
That moves a certain way, and that got that down right really well in that scene. So at this point, let's backtrack a little bit though, because I kind of want to set up what the setting of this movie is and how it starts. Without giving too much away, but I kind of went in it without knowing a lot about it. I actually did that on purpose. And I feel like that's a benefit of watching movies that aren't brand new and that came out at least a few years ago, because, you're not looking at the trailer. And it's actually, the way I got it was on Vudu, the movie platform there. And instead of trying to go online and order a physical copy, I was like, I'm just getting it right here so I could have it in my library and watch it. And I didn't even try to, I didn't want to look at the description either.
Really?
Because when you look on online streaming things, you generally want to see description, what it's about. It's like, no, I'm not even going to try to look at that. I'm just going to hit buy now. And I did. And I'm glad I did.
How you roll.
Yeah, exactly. And especially knowing we were going to talk about it, I was like, I'm just going to pull the trigger and check this out. But the movie, it starts off really in a crazy fashion. It's very eerie. It's seemingly in this back east or backwoods setting where there's not a lot of civilization, maybe somewhere. I want to say maybe
rural.
It's rural. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. And I think it's South Dakota. I don't know. And the reason why I say that is because one of the characters, he's a policeman. He has an emblem. I noticed I watched it twice. On the second viewing, it says SD. So I'm almost wondering if that's what that means. I mean, those of you
That's
who
some details there, Johnny.
I know. I just happen to notice, like, where does this actually take place? So yeah, no, he just seems to be hanging out in a rural area, sees this guy stumble onto the street. He thinks he's drunk and picks him up and says, "Oh gosh, I could go to the nearest hospital and take him." Initially, he thought he was drunk, but upon inspecting the person stumbling out of the forest, he clearly has more wrong with him.
Yeah.
And gets on the radio, and it seems like it's kind of hospitals are far from him or hard to come by, at least in that area.
That there's just one that covers like a particular radius.
Right. And already I'm engaged at this point. I think the filmmakers are already doing a good job of engaging you, especially before this scene, because this is all at the beginning. These two people straight up murder someone. And that just happens right off the bat. And you know nothing about the characters. And it's a very brutal way, too. It's it's shooting and lighting on fire, and that's terrible. And you're like, oh my gosh, these people are monsters. Why would they do this? And you find that they're not the biggest monsters in the movie.
The thing that really got me. So most horror movies. So the thing that I love. Let me backtrack. I'm getting too excited for myself. So this movie is only an hour and a half.
Yeah,
which is a little unheard of for anything that came out
Mm-hmm.
after 2015, maybe even after 2012.
Yeah.
So hour and a half is very standard, foundational kind of approach to movies, and they stuck to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not waste any time. Like you're talking about,
right.
Directors who are not household names, actors who are also not nearly as well known, and when you have these two things working against you, and you're kind of an indie film, because it's kind of got that feel to it.
Totally.
It wasn't like a major studio release. You have one shot. You have one shot to get people's attention, to grab them and keep them. And so don't wait to give the goods to your audience. And they didn't. They didn't wait at all.
No.
It was like instantaneous. Yeah, we've got a small, short, quick setup. Boom. We're in the story, and it's fucking wild.
Yeah.
Because everything was super normal, and then sheriff goes to check on, he hears a sound or he hears something, he goes to check on someone, and there is this lady with scissors?
I think it's scissors or something, yeah, some sharp object.
Deep into this dude's eye.
At the hospital, yeah.
Down to the handle, deep. And then she turns around and does this. What did she say? This isn't
my face.
This isn't my face?
Yeah, and she's apparently has already possibly done some self-mutilation to her face as well.
Peeling off the skin, cutting it off. You know what it made me think of? You know what I'm thinking?
Yes.
Evil Dead.
Yep.
The remake in 2013.
Yep, exactly.
Thing where
just
cutting
off
into the glass of the face.
Oh.
Yeah, that really gets me. Self-mutilation when you're not in your right mind is what, I don't know why, it just gets to me down into my bones.
Right. No, likewise. And it's, it makes me also think of real life cases where someone does something like they drop acid or do drugs or something. They don't realize they do it until after they come out of it. It's just a frightening thought.
And it's permanent.
And it's permanent, yeah. I mean, if you're scarring yourself. In this case, though, this movie, at that point when that happened to, the policeman has already made it to the hospital with the suspect or whoever the person was who was seemingly injured and in bad shape, makes it to the hospital. And this hospital is very empty. I mean, there's very small staff there, and they have this intern who's like supposed to file stuff for them. And so they're already laying the groundwork for some of these characters. One complaint I guess I would have about, back to your point too, about this movie being really short, an hour and 30 minutes, you gotta fill in stuff in there, right? And I feel like I wanted to know the characters a little bit more before we jump right into that crazy scene you just described. He's forced to have to confront her, and she charges him. And when you think about all these crazy things happening in a small window of time, I think the director, especially, and the actors did a good job of playing off like how this would really, people would react in shock, almost in disbelief that this has just happened. I think they captured that sort of like, what do people immediately do after a tragedy or disaster like that? And I think they did that really well. But you don't have time to breathe and really get to analyze how they respond to this event, because the next crazy thing happens pretty quickly after that too.
Yeah, it just starts to pick up steam.
Yes.
Right? And really charge forward. My favorite cutaway was like some conversation they're having in the lobby or something, and they cut the whole story cuts back to this nurse laying dead on the ground, and it's just
yes, exactly.
Just stuff just waving out of her nose and her mouth, and just very The Thing.
Right. Yeah. It was at that point after he shot her. It's a crime scene at that point, right? So, you know, they give you a little glimpse of they haven't tampered with the crime scene yet, but like you said, it's that cutaway, and it's interesting because when I watched it the second time, they randomly cut away to it. And you just see like her legs gyrating, and the camera just sort of pans over to her face. Yeah, and she has just like these, I don't know, spider leg looking things coming out of her face.
They're so crazy.
It's crazy, and they don't. That's another thing I noticed with the practical effects of this movie too, and all the monsters they show that start emerging as the chaos ensues. Is they're mostly quick shots. They don't dwell on a shot too often. Too long, I should say, on a creature or a creature doing something or someone being attacked by it. It's very just like quick and subtle, and enough to really make you like just kind of uneasy about it. Like, whoa, what did I just see there? That was crazy.
Yeah.
I felt like that a lot of the time.
There's not enough time for you to try to understand what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really important because for a second, let's just imagine we are the characters.
Yeah.
Right? And I can really appreciate directors taking the experience to the audience by giving them the same sort of wild roller coaster ride that the characters might be going through. So if we don't have time to look at these creatures or monsters to kind of get a sense of understanding, then we don't get to understand them at all, right? We're sort of in this state of frantic, journey of A to B, C to D, and just keep going, because that's what the characters are doing. So if we were there, we were in that moment, we were at the hospital, we saw this crazy transformation happen, probably our instinct would be go for the kill.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here with that. I want to kill it, set it on fire, get it out of here.
Yeah.
And
kill it with fire.
They didn't have time to look at it. They didn't have time to dissect. They weren't lifting up parts and trying to cut it open and understand what they were looking at. It was just very, I want to survive. Let's just keep moving forward to try to get to some kind of solution. As an audience, we're experiencing the same thing. We don't have time. They don't have time. So we're going to go on this ride together.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I got that feeling too. And in my head, I was playing out the scenarios too, like what I would do. And the first thing I was thinking about is why aren't they getting into that car or any car and just driving away? You do see that they can't do that easily, though, because there are these hooded figures with a black
that show
triangle
up out of nowhere. Yeah, these are. I mean, are they people? I don't know.
I don't know. I think they're. You start to learn as the movie goes on that there's something more sinister to this whole thing, more than just some random spawn of Satan kind of just coming out and destroying and killing everyone. Monsters. There's something more to that. And the movie overall with that theme doesn't give you a lot of answers. Maybe more questions, but some evidence as to what could have happened. And the reoccurring symbol I've noticed throughout the movie, and it's pretty obvious throughout, is throughout all the chaos that's happening, they'll show like random scenic shots of like an overcast happening and a giant black shape mass of a triangle in the sky. And it doesn't give you an explanation. It just shows you these quick shots and visions for the audience. And in some cases, the characters are seeing these visions in their mind. Most of this, it's a Canadian production, by the way. So it's all, which is probably why I didn't recognize a lot of movies. Although there's some good movies that come out of Canada, especially in the horror genre. Pontypool comes to mind.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. And there's some actors. I think there was an actor in this movie who was in that one as well. And Daniel Fathers, who, funny enough, that's his real name, Daniel Fathers. He plays the father. So I don't know. I'm sure they had some inside jokes about that on set.
They must have.
Which, as you can imagine, with a name like that in the movie, credited as the father, you really don't know about this character either. Well, he's the one initially at the beginning of the movie who kills someone with, I believe is his son, right? or some relation to having that character. But anyways, they show up at the hospital too in the midst of all this chaos because they're on the run as well. And I guess when you're in a rural community or where there's not a lot going on, I guess one of your thoughts is let's just go to the hospital maybe, because then you have medical supplies. So I guess that was the reasoning.
Which is an interesting thought if you really think about it, because what does pop culture really tell us? That in situations like that look post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic, hospitals are kind of scary. There's a lot of people there. A lot of people usually flock to hospitals. So for one, there's going to be lots of traffic. Mm-hmm. Two, there's going to be lots of frantic, panicked people.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a lack of supplies because they're going to be used up.
Right.
Because the hospital and the staff are completely overwhelmed. So it seems kind of a strange move there.
It does. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure what the character's drive was to do that. But regardless, they show up there and they're on a mission. They want to get to that drug addict guy that the policeman picked up from the beginning. Because apparently they had a fiasco with him. Oh, he was one of the ones trying to escape those people at the beginning. But anyways, there's a lot going on in this movie, and it all kind of culminates at this hospital. So I like how it played out for the most part. I just questioned some of the motives of the characters at times.
Like what?
Like the father, for example, and the person he was with. It just, I was wondering why they felt the need to go to the hospital for one, as we just said, but why did they want to get at that guy so badly at the expense of just possibly putting themselves in danger? But yeah, it really was it bugged me too, because I was like, you know what? If I saw hooded figures outside of the hospital and they're not letting us leave, I'm going to barricade those doors. They just left them wide open, right? I was just like, why did they cover them in some way? I mean, they know they're out there. Ultimately, they made some use out of it, though. They go out there to get the shotgun.
So that was something that I appreciated, even though it was something that I had a little bit of a hard time following. So I remember Sheriff goes out to his vehicle. He's going to make a call on the radio or something, and that's the first time that he sees the hooded figure. A hooded figure attacks him, right? And that's how we know things are getting super serious. Mm-hmm. Well, in those shots, the car's right outside the hospital.
Right.
Like right outside. And they say it when he finally convinces the father and I guess his son to come out to come get the shotgun and some other ammunition supplies from the vehicle. And they step outside and the father's like, I thought you said it was close. And it looks like it is way the hell out. Parked
right.
super far from the hospital, which doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so what's going on in here? What are they playing at? Did we just somehow jump into another dimension? Is this a portal? What are we really dealing with here? Sure. And are these hooded figures behind it all? Are they the cause of it? Because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
And they look really ominous, too. Like, they're white hooded figures, and they have this, like, black triangle shape on their face. It's covered. Their faces are covered, too.
Right.
They're shrouded. So it just looks very scary. And when they're collecting together, too, because they're in the dozens as well. They just show up.
With these massive ass knives.
Yeah, they have huge knives for some reason. and they'll attack you if you try to escape, I guess.
So in thinking about that scene and thinking about the one I described before, the first encounter that the sheriff had with a hooded figure, I have to make comments about the DP work. I thought it was fantastic.
Yes.
The lighting, the staging, the composition, everything about some things that don't seem like they're a big part of the story. They're not meant to be this big, ominous, foreshadowing kind of shot. Mm-hmm. But it didn't matter. It was like everybody cared about what they were making. And it's almost like they just loved every part of it. Like everybody on set was a horror fan. Everybody loved what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And they were just really out to make a really great product. Right. And so there were just so many different things that I appreciated about the movie. Yes, some things were a little like
questionable.
Getting some of the background information, like the sheriff and his wife.
Yeah.
Like that was very too much exposition for me.
Yeah.
Where they're just handing it. You know, the whole idea about film is show, don't tell.
Exactly.
It's exactly what they didn't do. They told us who these characters were. They told us their interesting backstory by just saying, oh, she's having a hard time right now. You know, losing a baby is tough.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's like,
There's an opportunity there, and we missed it.
Right. And that's why I was like, back to my point about the length of the movie. I felt like they could have spent a little bit extra time at the beginning to show the
But that's a hard decision to make, because if you're a filmmaker, first of all, you're thinking about budget, right? How much funding do you have?
Yeah.
And looking at what they did practically in the effects, like, I'm sure that's where a lot of their money went.
Quick note on that. Sorry to interrupt. It was this is mostly a crowdsourced movie too, by the way.
Was it really?
Yeah. So that makes total sense. Just to add what you're saying, they probably were really strategic on how they used the time in the movie they had and the budget, and to put it towards what the fans were hoping for was a classic horror film with just practical effects. And that costs money and time and effort to do all of that.
It's a lot of money. And
so where do you want to put those resources?
And thinking about trying to be in their shoes, if I had to make that decision, I probably would go that route too. Because even though the story is really where it matters, sometimes you're looking at the genre that you're in. In horror, what do fans really want? Like, we want the adrenaline rush. Yeah. We want that, crazy ass ride.
Blood and guts.
And I don't want you to CGI the shit out of it.
Right.
Like, give me something that I can remember and hold on to while I'm going through this whole story. And with those creatures, they really did it. They pulled it off, and it wasn't cheesy. It wasn't campy. I mean, every time one of those creations came onto the screen, I just beside myself. I couldn't look at it straight on, but I had to. It's like looking at a fucking train wreck.
Yeah.
Like, I can't not look at it. And that's how I want to feel about monsters on screen. Because here's the thing. Also, usually the mystery goes away. Usually the fright goes away when we see the monster.
Usually. That's right. Yeah.
Did not happen in this film.
No, not at all. Especially when you knew there was more than one monster they were dealing with, and a bigger, more sinister background to all of that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of my favorite characters is the Doctor, who is basically the bad guy in this. He's the main villain. And
did you get any Pinhead vibes from this guy?
I did.
Yeah, I did. His voice, his mannerisms, very Pinhead to me.
Yeah, and just very his delivery on the lines too. Like the one, I think his best performance in the whole movie is kind of his monologue about why he started this chaos to begin with. He's behind a lot of this stuff happening, or most of it, if not all. And he's going through this as the wife of the sheriff, or ex-wife, I guess, whatever.
I have no idea. That's
they suffered a loss. They lost a child, and it's a tragic thing. And even knowing about situations in real life where that happens to people, sometimes relationships grow stronger, or sometimes they grow apart. And they kind of explored that a little bit. But especially with this doctor, he was the one that kind of relates to that, because he lost his daughter too, and he was just so saddened and broken by that, losing his daughter. He at least my interpretation is he resorted to this researching how to come back to life and keep people living, and at what expense. It didn't matter to him, and the expense is we get to see all of I think the line that the father says is, we're in hell at one point, when they they're surrounded by like just these creatures. And
that's right.
Yeah, he's like,
we're in hell.
And you see that unfold because of the selfish doctor who, no matter, like, he doesn't care about anyone else. If anyone else dies, I don't care. I'm going to get my daughter back.
And no matter in what form.
Either, right?
Which is also a little mind-blowing. So one of the things I can truly appreciate also, that I can forgive like too much exposition, or not really giving us time to develop backstory. So I knew that the pregnant girl in the lobby was gonna throw us for a loop. I knew that there was gonna be something
behind it,
wrong, and I was trying to anticipate what that was gonna be. Like, I thought, oh, her baby's gonna come out, it's gonna be this like ugly looking monster, and she's gonna freak out and die, and it'll be this gruesome bloody thing.
The end.
Yeah. And I'm coming up with all these explanations, and none of them were what actually happened.
Right. You knew there was something up, but it's still, and that's, I think overall, I think for me too, and I'm sure you can agree, is that's what I love about this genre, when there's quality movies like this, where you think the movie's going to set you up to think a certain way, but then it throws you for a loop in a creative way and an interesting way. I hate it when it's so predictable all the time.
That's why I think that everybody who was part of the film, writers, directors, producers, love horror.
Yeah. You have a lot of those options, you know. You can lead the audience one way, and you can choose to keep going that way and take the easy route, or you can introduce these little plot elements or big plot elements that will just make your jaw drop sometimes, like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that was going to happen. And which I do a lot in these movies that we're watching, especially for Gutted. But
I also like that I could forgive how outlandish some of the concepts were, like the feeling. So I got a lot of Silent Hill, right?
Silent Hill, yes, and that was because mostly you get this interdimensional environment that's going into like a very hellish looking area, and then when characters snap out of it and come out of that trance, I guess you can say, they're back in the room that they were originally in. You know?
Yeah. I got a lot of Hellraiser because of some of the makeup and some of the effects, the skin, you know, and then Midnight Meat Train.
Midnight Meat Train, right?
Because of the concept.
That's right, yeah.
And Midnight Meat Train, I did cover in one of those older episodes.
Yeah, check it out. It's back on our channel.
One of the things that I critiqued that movie on was how it threw us for a loop and took us into this really weird, dark ending that didn't really match the tone of the rest of the film. And it was like, I wanted more setup on that. I wanted to have more time with that or at least explore it into a sequel or something like that. I didn't feel that way with this when they introduced the Abyss and like this whole other world and, you know, almost not quite a cliffhanger ending. One of those, like, you know, could there be a sequel? Probably going to be a sequel if there's money for it.
Right.
I was okay with it because the whole tone of the movie was consistent with what they were doing. They introduced monsters right away. We got a lot of looks at the creature. We got introductions into this whole like weird interdimensional kind of portal hopping thing that was going on. So when we got to the end, I didn't feel like things were out of place.
No. And they just amp it up though more with the what he discovers, what's behind all of this, and I think the imagery behind it, back to your point about the cinematography, there are shots that really enhance what's on screen, especially the room they're in at the end with the triangle shape that opens up into the abyss. There's like, to me it looked like body bags, like evenly rowed, like in rows, and with the hooded figures, and
the magic trick never fails.
Yeah, exactly.
It keeps you, which is hard to do. It's really hard to do as a filmmaker and a storyteller. So I appreciate being exposed to that movie, having a run with it, and getting it to view it without a whole lot of setup, like what you were saying. Like, it's nice to just kind of sit down without any expectations, without any, seeing a bunch of previews or hearing a lot of chatter online about it. I just got a raw introduction into this movie, into the void, which I highly recommend doing. I mean, obviously, if you're watching this episode and you haven't seen it, you know what you're getting yourself into, but anytime you get a chance to really deep dive into a film without a whole lot of setup, just do the Johnny method. Scroll through and look at a film and be like, you know what, that looks interesting. I'm committed. I'm watching it right now.
Right. And I'm hoping more of you online will just tell us to watch a movie, because I will have that same approach. I'll say, you know what, I might look it up just to make sure it falls under our genre and what we want to talk about, but more often than not, I'm sure it will be. And just probably that's it, the bare minimum, and just start watching it, download it on a streaming platform, and just enjoy the ride without knowing anything about it.
Yeah.
And then just real quick, I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, but one thing I do want to mention is, without explaining the ending too much, I do know at least that the filmmakers left it a little bit ambiguous so you can sort of formulate your own theory. So what did
Was
you...
that intentional?
I was intentional, as I read about online. I do read about the movie after the fact, so that's one thing I'll do. You know, before I watch it, I try to go in...
Before we record the episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, before that. And I just get the overall impression that it was a giant cult operation that headlined by one of the characters, and you just see a product of that, and it's kind of up to you how the characters end up where they're at. And then I feel like it's just like interdimensional things, so maybe they end up in another dimension. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I'd like to leave it at that. And maybe that's the beauty of some horror films too. You don't need to have the answers, you know?
Yeah.
Leave that big question mark at the end, because that just, to me, I love stories like that, especially when they do a good enough job to get you through the story. I feel like one of my favorite movies of all time, The Shining, does that too. You know, right?
How have you not done The Shining yet?
I don't know. Maybe we need to now, considering now that Dr. Sleep, the sequel, came out recently, which is not too many people, I don't think, watched. Came out last year, but yeah, Danny grows up and he's in this movie, and it's an official book. You know, there was a sequel written by Stephen King, so they made a movie about it. But anyways, yeah, we should do that. We should do The Shining, because as all of you know, if you haven't seen The Shining, shame on you. Stop this right now and go watch it.
Exactly.
But, just that big question mark at the end, like just this slow zoom into like that classic 1920s ballroom with people there, and the main characters there. It's like, what the hell was that about? And you just kind of sit there like, I don't know what that was about, but...
Or how this even works, or what rules are in this reality that I'm watching. But in thinking about the fact that it's open-ended for the audience to come up with their own conclusions, it feels to me like a lot of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yes, and that's interesting you mentioned that, because I know you don't read a lot about behind the scenes, but that was mentioned in some of the behind the scenes where their inspiration came from.
It makes a lot of sense. H.P. Lovecraft was very much about old fears, things we couldn't understand, things that were beyond our comprehension, and this was sort of like that. It was, I think there was a mention of, dealing with something older than us, or because somebody was like, "Oh, are you some devil worshiper, or something?"
I don't believe in the devil.
Satan or something. Yeah. And that's completely dismissed as being a human concept, and this, whatever this reality is, these rules, this pyramid, this dimension, it goes way beyond our world or our understanding of it. And in that, I think that's what makes it so terrifying, because I like to believe that it is just something that was yet to be uncovered by our society. And what this doctor had uncovered was something that was sort of kind of that reality. Just sort of sitting undisturbed under a rock somewhere, and he just uncovered it and woke it up. Like Evil Dead. Yeah,
exactly. And it aligned with what he wanted too, which was his daughter. He just wanted her back in some way.
And no matter what shape. I can't get over it. No matter what shape.
What shape, yeah. You'll be in for a treat to find out what that means when you check this movie out.
That poor girl.
I know, right? She was just so brainwashed.
Devoted.
Yeah.
So devoted.
Brainwashed. That's what comes to mind there with that. Well, anyways, yeah, as we've mentioned, check this out, especially if you love those classic horror films from 80s era, The Thing, pretty much any horror film that is considered a classic.
And a monster movie.
And a monster movie, you will enjoy this movie a lot. I can guarantee that. I know we did. And,
I had a good ride. It was a good ride.
Filmmaking too, how the actors decided to play the parts knowing full well what's to come, I think is really important and challenge too, and they pulled it off really well.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. So this was a really good pick from somebody who watches our channel, which means we love to take suggestions. If you have a film that you think we need to check out, something maybe we've seen but we haven't reviewed, and you'd like to hear us and see us chat about it, you can send it to our email. It is guttedreviews@gmail.com, and hopefully we'll get it on to a future episode. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up to date with whenever we come out with new episodes. And then, of course, the podcast side, if you're listening to us, because remember, you can take us on the road with you, or you can sit and watch the episode. We're on Anchor, Spotify, pretty much wherever you can get your podcasts. Wherever you do get them, subscribe to Gutted Reviews.
And we're also on social media. You can find us on Instagram under the handle gutted_horror.
And please forgive us. We do the best that we can to maintain it. If we get more followers, maybe we'll be on there more often. But you can find us there. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.